All right, welcome back guys to the third part in this series. So in the last two parts, we accomplished quite a bit. We set up the full JSON Web Token authentication on the back end, and we started putting our React project together. So far, this is what we managed to accomplish. We have our front end where we have the home, a login, register, and then if we're logged in, then here in the nav bar, we're gonna see a dashboard and logout button. But so far, these pages, they don't really have anything on them. And we still need to have our authentication logic implemented through Redux and then also through Express as well, because Express is going to be dealing with those cookies that are going to store our access and refresh tokens. They're also going to need to set those cookies somehow. So we're going to see how all of that is accomplished. So let's get into it. So right now, just one thing I want to point out is I have three different terminals open. I have one that's running my Django backend. I have one that's running my Express server, which currently my Express server isn't really doing anything until we add some route handlers. And then I also have my front-end React client running as well. So make sure you're doing the same. So I'm just going to minimize these, and then I'm going to open up this front-end folder. And let's see, what would be the first thing to work on? Let's maybe create a route handler that allows us to register for an account. I think that would be a pretty good start. So instead of having this client open, instead I'm going to work inside of this front end folder. And I'm just going to create a folder called routes. So this is where I'm going to have my different route handlers. And then I might also make another subfolder that's something like auth. And then in there, I can have my register.js. So this is going to be my first route handler that I put together. And then, yeah, I guess I'll just get started with it in here. So I'll do const express equals require express. And then I'm going to do const router is equal to express.router. So I'm going to create a router, and then I'm going to do a module.exports equals router. So between here, I'm going to put together this route handler. So to register, this is going to be a post request, and then I'm expecting to receive in the JSON data, the first name, the email, last name, password. So those are the four things I need. So I'm going to do router.post. And then the endpoint for this could be /API/users/register. So this is going to be on localhost 5000 that this endpoint's getting hit. And then I'm going to have a callback function with request response. And then inside of here, so in this route handler on Express, which is running on localhost 5000, this is going to have to make an AJAX request to my Django backend, because my Django backend is what has my app logic. It's what has the database. It's what has the endpoint that lets me actually create an account. So I'm going to need to hit my Django backend API from this handler, which means I need to have a way to actually make that request. So to do that in Express, I'm going to have to install something. So inside of this terminal, which is the one that's running my Express app, so it has this server listening on port 5000. So I'm going to kill this with Control-C, and then I'm going to install. And I'm going to install an Npm package called node fetch. So I'm just going to open up the documentation for node fetch real quick. So npm node fetch. So here we are. So the way that I have to bring this in, because I don't have that ES6 syntax, so there's a more special way that I can bring this in. So if I scroll down, here's if you do have the ES6 syntax. Here is how you have to do it when you don't have it. And in our case, we don't with our Express app. So this is what I'm going to go ahead and copy. I'm going to flip back to my application and just paste this line right here. So this is going to allow me to now use this fetch, the same way that we see it being used in our React application when we do just the fetch API. It's going to be the same sort of deal inside of here. So with that, first thing I want to do is I want to extract the first name, last name, email, and password from the rec.body. So right now, this rec.body, there's not going to be anything inside of here because we have to go into our index.js and we have to apply some middleware in here. So right below here, I'm going to do an app.use express.json. So this middleware right here is what's going to allow this to actually work. I'm going to be able to receive the JSON data, and then on this request, I'm going to have this body where then I can just destructure these values from there. So I would get an error without this middleware right here. All right. So the next thing I'm going to do is have a try catch, because I'm going to be making an AJAX request now. So I'm going to do const response is await. Now I do have rec and res in here, so this I'm going to have to actually name something else. So instead I'm going to do register response is await fetch, and then the endpoint I'm going to be hitting is going to be the localhost 8000 endpoint. And then if I open up my auth site URLs, so I'm going to have API/users/ and then if I open up my users URLs, register. So API users register. So it's the exact same as this, except it's on a different domain, because this handler is on localhost 5000, this one's on localhost 8000. Now, a convenient thing to do, instead of just putting in HTTP, then localhost 8000 in here, it would be nice to have an environment variable where I can just grab that. So that's something I can set up quickly. So inside of this front end folder, and also I'm going to minimize this now, just so I don't have so many things open. So inside of this front end folder, I'm going to make a .env file. Then in here, I'm going to do API URL. And I'm going to set this equal to my HTTP localhost 8000. And then another nice thing where it might come in handy later is just having my node environment set to development. So there we are. I'm going to have these two things. Now my Express app, it doesn't really recognize these things, doesn't know how to read these values. So I'm going to have to install a particular package. So again, inside of a terminal that's navigated inside of my front end, I'm going to npm install save.env. So this package is what's going to allow me to actually be able to read these values in this .env file. I'm just going to clear this up now. And then in order for that to actually work, I have to open up this index.js, and then maybe right below here, I can do a require for .env, and then just directly call the config. So just straight from there, require it in and immediately call the config. And that's going to allow the environment variables to actually work. Then I'm also going to minimize that, close this up. So now what I can do instead here is I can have backticks, and then I can bring in process.env.api URL, because that's what we called our environment variable. Then we're going to have /API/users/register. Then we're going to have a second parameter here, which is going to be our options. So here I'm going to pass a method of post, because this endpoint is going to be expecting a post request, which I can show here, define post. And then it's just going to go through all this process. And then at the end, we're going to get a 201 status code if this was successful. Otherwise, it's going to fail. Now, the next thing I can do is pass headers, where I can have an accept header, application/JSON, and then I'm also going to have a content type of application JSON, because I will be passing this along. Now first, I need to JSON stringify this. So I'm going to store that in a variable called body, where then I'm going to do json.stringify, and then I can have first name, last name, email, and password. Now another thing you could do is you don't even have to do this line here. You could just immediately do something like this. Just JSON stringify request body. That's it. Now, I'm not going to do this just because I think this makes it a little bit more clear what data I'm actually extracting in here and working with. So instead of doing this one line, which would be kind of nice just to have this one line, I'm going to keep it as this just because it makes it a little bit more clear. So that's how I'm going to have it. And then I can just pass along the body. And then this is the equivalent of doing body, but I can just have it like so. And then after this, I'm going to check the status code. And then I'm also going to extract the data. So first I'm going to do the data. So that's going to be await register response.json. And then actually I don't even need to check the status code. What I can do is just immediately return and just mirror whatever the status and JSON data is. So that's what I'm going to do instead. So return response.status. And then I'm just going to grab whatever the register response.status was. If it's a 201, that's what's going to get sent back to my React application. If it's something else, that will get sent back. And then I can do .json, and then just pass back whatever data was brought back. So if I ended up getting a 201, then I'm just going to get the user data. Otherwise, I'm going to get some sort of error response, whatever's on the serializer.errors, which is stuff we saw in the first part in this series. So that's how this is going to work. And then if we hit this catch, instead, I'm just going to hard code a 500 and then just pass back some manual error here. So I'm just going to do error, and it's going to say something went wrong when registering account. And there we are. So this right here is our route handler all set up. So next thing I'm going to do is go into my index.js file, and then I'm going to bring it in here. And actually, I'm going to do it after this .env just because we're using an environment variable in here. So I just want to make sure nothing goes wrong. So then I can do const register route is equal to require. And then that's inside of my routes auth register. And then right over here, so right after this app.use express JSON, I can do an app.use register route. So there we are. So I can just save that now. So now we have a route handler all set up here. So now let's test out actually putting together an action creator, which is going to be an async thunk that goes ahead and does this register. So let's now, or actually first I want to close this up and then open up my client. I can also close up these files. Then I'm going to open up my features user. So inside of here is where I'm going to set up this async thunk. So I can do that, say, right at the top here. Actually, no, I'll do it below the initial state. So I'm going to do const register is equal to, and what's it equal to? Let's go ahead and open up our Redux Toolkit documentation and take a look at this function. So Redux Toolkit, and then get started. And then under the API reference, you're going to see this create async thunk. So this is the function we'll be using. So first of all, we need to import it inside of the file. So we can bring it in like so. There we go. Now I have it inside of this file. So that's what we're going to be calling. So now what do we pass to this thing? So let's take a look. So right here, they're calling it. And in this case, they're calling it with 2 parameters. There are 3 that you can pass to this, but typically you're just going to pass 2. The first being the dispatch type. So you're going to do like the slice of data and then something like this, which is similar to the action creator name. So fetch by ID status. Here they have fetch user by ID. So it's just something that makes sense. And then the next thing is going to be an asynchronous callback function, which takes 2 parameters. And then it doesn't have to take 2 parameters. You can also, let's say, omit this thunk API. But the key thing is this thing takes 2 parameters. So let's say if I'm doing my register, I have my dispatch type of user/register. And then here I have my async callback. So over here, if I were to pass first name, last name, email, and password, this right here would be my data. This would be that thunk API. This would just be some unknown values. So I need to pass this inside of 1 parameter, which you can do with an object. And that's also something that they have in the documentation listed somewhere. It's probably down here with the payload creator. Yeah, so right here under this arg. So a single value containing the first parameter that was passed to the thunk action creator when it was dispatched. This is useful for passing values like item IDs that may be needed as part of the request. Now, if you need to pass multiple values, pass them together in an object when you dispatch the thunk. So that's something that they mentioned here in the documentation. And then the payload creator, that is just this part right here, that second argument. So the first argument, that is the dispatch type. So this is going to be a string that's used to generate additional Redux action type constants representing the lifecycle of an async request. So if you had something like users/request status, then it's going to generate these 3 out of that. So it's going to have this initial part, which is the same as this. And then you're going to have a slash pending, slash fulfilled, and slash rejected dispatch type that's generated based on what you pass as the type. So that means for our users register, we're going to have a slash fulfilled, we're going to have a slash rejected, and slash, what was the last one? Oh yeah, pending. So we're going to have these three generated. So pending is going to be when, of course, it's pending, the asynchronous action is still going on. And then once it finishes, it's either going to be fulfilled or rejected. So for the rejected, what you can do is you can use that second parameter of the Thunk API. And then it has a function called reject with value, where then you can pass a payload with this. So this is going to trigger that rejected dispatch type. So that's the way that that can work. And then also, I think I just realized something that I want to fix real quick. So inside of this route handler, so here, this should actually be async. So that's something I just clicked in. So this right here, make sure it's asynchronous because we're doing an asynchronous fetch request here to our Django backend. So anyway, back to this now. So the next step is going to be to actually make our asynchronous request. And this is going to go to our Express server. So I'm just going to save this real quick. So I just want to have my prettier formatter reformat this for me. So here I have that first argument. Also, I'm going to be making use of the Thunk API second argument. And then inside of here, in our callback function, the first thing that we can do is const body is JSON stringify. Then we're going to JSON stringify the first name, last name, email, and password. So once again, just like I was kind of mentioning with the route handler, what you can do is you don't have to pass this like this. You could just do arg, and then you could just JSON stringify arg. So this way it's just very condensed, but I think this makes it very clear as to what you're actually passing in here and then what you're actually JSON stringifying. So I like to do it like this. Then I'm going to have a try catch. And then in here, I'm going to do const response is await fetch. And now here, we're going to be doing our, actually, no, I'm going to import API URL from config. Then I think you have to do config/index for it to work properly. And then I can just do API URL, because in our environment variable, we have that localhost 5000. And then that's going to be /API users register. Because again, that's what our route handler on Express is expecting right here. API users register. And then we're going to go ahead and pass some options. This is expecting a post request. I did do post, right? Good. Okay, so now I can do method of post, pass my headers. I'm going to have an accept header. So that's going to be application JSON. And I'm also going to have my content type, because I'm passing along JSON data. And then I can just pass the body. So now this is either going to succeed or it's going to fail. So I know it's successful when I have a response status equal to 201. Otherwise, I know that this failed. All right. So in the case where it's successful, I'm just going to return whatever data comes back from here. So const data is await response.json. So this data, so if I open up my backend users views, so this register view on a successful request, it's just going to send back the user data. Now, I'm not really going to be making use of the user data or the errors in this application, just to keep things a little bit more simple and just kind of show you the point of Redux Toolkit and authentication more so than these little minute details. So in this case, I will be returning this data in a payload, but when I return it, I'm not going to be using it to do anything in here. I could update the user, but more specifically, I'm just going to have a handler for actually fetching the user, and that's going to be the thing that actually updates this rather than this register. I think that's a little bit better. So that's the way I'm going to have it. And then in this case, where we don't get a 201, then I'm going to return thunk API dot reject with value and then pass the data. So that's going to be the payload, except this reject with value, it's going to now dispatch a dispatch type of users /register/rejected. All right. And then right here in the catch, I'm going to do something similar and just send back this, except I'm not going to have data in this case. So what I can do instead is error.response.data. And that's how I can grab that. So error is going to have this response, and then that's going to have data. So there we are. Now we have an action creator set up. So now the question, we have this user slice. So now how can we accept the dispatch types from this action creator, which is our async thunk? How do we accept the dispatch types into this create slice? So this is something the documentation shows, which should be inside of the create slice, I believe. Is that the, oh yeah, here it is. So we have reducers, but we also have extra reducers. So extra reducers is where we can accept things outside. So dispatches outside of the actual slice itself. And then if I scroll down, there should be an example. So here they have extra reducers. So one of the key concepts of Redux is that each slice reducer owns its slice of state, and that many slice reducers can independently respond to the same action type. Extra reducers allows create slice to respond to other action types besides the types it has generated. So that's kind of what I was mentioning. And then here we have a builder callback notation, which you can use. You can also use another notation to do this, but this is the way that I prefer to do it. So here you can see an example of that, and you can have different things like add case, add matcher, add default case. I'm only going to be making use of add case in this case. So this is the way I'm going to do it. So you're going to have extra reducers, which is your key, and then you're going to have a builder callback where then you just do builder.addCase. And then here they don't really show it with the async thunks. Oh yeah, here I guess they're going to show that method. And then also here's that other way of doing it without the builder callback. So you can also do it like this. And then I just want to find where they have the async thunk example just to show you that. So it's not here. And it's not here either. So probably under async thunk they have it. Oh yeah, here it is. So they have an example under the async thunk, where then you have the extra reducers, and then you're going to have your builder.addCase, your action creator name. So in this case, they have fetch user by ID is the name of the action creator. And then they have dot fulfilled. And then you can also do dot rejected and dot pending as well, and just add cases for those. And then you're going to have your state action callback, where from there you can adjust your Redux state. And then another good thing to do is with these, you can just export them out of here. So the fetch user by ID, you can just do an export, and then you can utilize, let's say in our case, the register inside of our register page. So let's go ahead and start hooking this up. So below this reducers, I'm going to have extra reducers, where I'm going to have my builder callback, and then I can do builder.addCase. And then I can have my register. I'm going to have register.pending. And then as a second argument, I'm going to have the state action callback. And then here, I can do whatever I want to the state. And then also I might actually bring this initial state down here just so it's easier to see it while I'm doing stuff inside of this slice. So the only thing I'm going to be doing in the pending is adjusting this loading to be true. And then remember, because of immer, we don't have to do return spread operator on the state or whatever. We can just adjust the state directly. So we can just do state.loading equals true. So that's going to be for the pending. So now I'm going to just put this down and indent. And then below this, also make sure to not have a comma or a semicolon, anything like that. You're just going to do another .addCase. You're going to chain it on. You're going to have register.fulfilled. Again, state and action. And now in this case, we're not using anything from the action because we're not using the payload. So what you can also do is just have state like this, and that would also work. And then in our fulfilled, we're also not using the action because we do have that data, which is our user data, but I'm not going to be changing this user state to anything. I'm going to instead be using an endpoint for retrieving the user to do that. So the only thing I'm going to be adjusting here, if we get this fulfilled, that means everything was successful. That means I can do state.registered equals true. So this is going to be true, which means on my register page, I can see that. And then I can be like, okay, let's now redirect this user to the login page. And then another thing I have to make sure I do is also adjust the state.loading to be false. So I'm going to have it like so. So there we are. And then finally, I'm going to add a case for my register.rejected. So I'm going to have state action. And then here, I'm going to have state.loading equals false. And then nothing else I'm going to be doing inside of the rejected other than just saying state.loading false. But let's say if you wanted to expand this application more, you might have something like an error where then you can go grab whatever's inside of this rejected, place it inside the error, and display that in some sort of alert or something. So you can always expand these things further. And then again, I'm not using the action, so I can also just omit it here. So there we are. Now we have full functionality for our register. So I think it would be kind of fun to now put together our register page and then actually test out using this thing. And then I also want to do an export here just so that I can bring it inside of my register page. All right, so now I can open up my containers register and let's start hooking this up together. So I'm going to import use selector and use dispatch from React Redux. So use selector is just so I can grab that register or that registered piece of state, and then I can see if it's true. If it is, I can navigate to the login. So to navigate, I'm going to have to bring in a component called navigate from React Router DOM. And then from there, I can check if registered, then I can just navigate them. So I can return my navigate component, which will navigate to /login. So right now we don't have this value for registered, so now we have to extract it using the use selector. So the way you can do that is you can just destructure registered, and then you can do use selector state arrow function state.user. So now we have access to it. So that's how you can extract those different values, and it's going to be state.user here again because inside of our store we refer to this as our user reducer. So now from there, we have to put together some kind of form. So I'm going to do register for an account and start putting this form together. So we're going to have divs with inputs and labels. Whoop. So we're going to have a label of first name, then with its input, and then I'm going to have the last name, input, email, and password, and then at the bottom we're going to have a button. So now we're going to have to do some stuff here. I'm going to have an onChange handler. So I'm going to do const onChange. Actually, before I do that, I'm also going to have some sort of state just to manage these different inputs. So that's probably the first thing I'm going to do before I do my handlers for the onChange onSubmit. I'm going to import use state from React. And then say right over here, I can do const form data set form data. It's going to be use state, and the state is going to be an object, which is going to have 4 keys, which is going to be my first name by default empty, last name by default empty, email by default empty, and password also by default empty. And then I can also destructure these values. So first name, last name, email, and password. I can destructure from my form data. So there we are. So now I can use them directly. So now with this first name, this is going to be an input that has type of text. And then it's also going to have the name first name. So then on my endpoint, I'm going to be expecting this to be passed like so as first name. Because on my route handler in Express, right over here, that's what I'm expecting it to be called, first underscore name. So actually right here. So that's why this name is handy and why it's also very important. And then here I can have an HTML4 first name, just to have a sort of link between the label and input here. And then after that, I'm going to have onChange And this is where I'm going to have my onChange handler. So let's create that. Const onChange. We'll take an event. And then from here, I can do set form data. Then spread operator on form data. And actually, I'm going to have an object here. And that, of course, it's going to be an object because our state itself is an object. So by doing spread operator on form data, I'm going to not change anything except for one value, which is the value I'm changing in the input. So in this case, it's going to be the first name. So when I do something like this, if I can type, so e.target.name, e.target.value. So when I have something like this, e.target.name, it's going to be first name. The value is going to be whatever I'm typing inside of this input. And everything else, which is the last name, email, password, will be untouched with the spread operator. So that's how this is going to work. And then I can just go ahead and pass this here. Then also to have this connection, I need to pass this value, which is going to be first name, which I destructured. So I can just pass it in. And then I also want this field to be required because we do need a first name. So I just want to have some front-end validation. So let's see what we got so far. So if I go to my register page, there we go. So now let's add some styling to this form. So I'm going to have some bootstrap styling where I can do class name form-group. Here I can have a class name of form label. And here I can have a class name of form input, form control. So now that's going to give me some better styling. And then also having a little bit of margin would be nice here. So on the form itself, I'll do a class name margin top 5. So that looks a little better. And now let's do the rest of our inputs. So I'm just going to copy actually this entire form group. Then I'm going to paste once, twice, and 3 times because we're going to have 4 inputs total. So we did the first name input right here. Next is going to be the last name. And then this HTML form is going to be last name. And then the name is going to be last name. The value is going to be last name. Everything else is the same. It's still a text input, same styling. It's still required. So this is all fine. So now our next one is going to be email. So here I'm going to have email as the HTML4. The type, it's going to be an email field just so I have some email validation going on. I'm going to have name of email, value of email, required, everything else is the same. And now we just have one left, and that's going to be our password. So here for the HTML4, I'm going to have password. This is going to be a type of password. That way it doesn't actually show the text, but it shows those little dots as you're typing. Name is going to be password, value is going to be password, and there we are. So the last thing we're going to need is the button, but let's take a look at things. So right now they're very close together. So I think it would be nice to have a little bit more spacing between these form groups. So the first one's fine, but on the second one, having margin top 3 would be good. Same with this one, and same with the last one. Let's save that. And there we go. Looks a lot better. So finally, we're going to need a button. And then this thing is what's going to go ahead and register the account. So here I'm just going to have the text of register. And then I can have some styling. So button, button primary, and also some margin at the top, maybe margin top 4, something like that. So now if I go back, there we go. You have a pretty nice looking form. So now when I click this button, I need this form to get submitted. So what I need, and also I don't like how this is, so I'm just going to add some curly braces so it looks a little nicer. There you go. So now I'm going to need an onSubmit handler. I'm just going to take an event, and then I'm going to do e.prevent defaults. So this will prevent the default behavior with the page getting refreshed when we submit the form. And then here is where I'm going to be utilizing my action creator. So I'm going to have to bring in my action creator. Do that right here. So import register from features user. And then here, I can't just do register and call that. That's not really going to work. I need to actually dispatch this. So the way I do that is with this use dispatch. Right at the top here, I can do const dispatch. Is use dispatch. And now I can dispatch this action creator. And then from there, I just have to pass in the parameters. Now I can't just do first name, last name. This is going to be expected as one parameter, which is going to be an object. And then from there, I can do first name, last name, email, and password. And then you could also just send in the form data, but this is a little bit more clear. So this is how I'm going to do it. And then we just have to grab this on submit. And then on this form, I'm going to do on submit is equal to on submit. There we go. So right now, everything should work. So when we dispatch this and it's successful, registered is going to be true, and that's going to navigate us to the login route. So let's see if this works now. And then another thing I'm going to do, just because I do not remember what data I have in the database, I'm going to stop running my backend. I'm just going to do a python manage.py flush, just so I can clear out whatever's in the database. And then I'm just going to rerun this server. So there we are. So now for my client, it's going to happen. So I'm going to fill out all this data. My state's going to be changed. I'm going to dispatch the register when I click that register button. And then on my features user, I'm going to go ahead and go through this process where I'm going to grab these values. I'm going to JSON stringify them. I'm going to make a fetch request to API URL, which is localhost 5000/API users register. It's going to be a post request where I pass in that body. So that's going to hit my express route. So my express route is going to expect this post request on this endpoint. So we're going to go ahead and grab that data, JSON stringify it again, and then we're going to make a fetch request to our Django backend API. And this Django backend API is what's going to actually register our user. So it's going to store that data in the database, and then it's going to send us the data back. So we're going to grab that data, which in this case is the user, and then here I'm going to send it back. So if we're successful, this will be a 201 status with the user, and then back inside of here, I can receive that, be like, okay, it's a 201, let's return that data, and then this user slice, it's going to have this fulfilled case, and then this fulfilled case is going to be a dispatch type where we have the, the users/register/fulfilled. So this is going to handle that, where then it's going to set loading to false and state.register to true. And also while this whole request is going on, we're going to be hitting this first, which will set the loading to true. And that also reminds me of one more thing I need to do, which is on this register page. I also want to bring in loading. And then I just want to have a loader when we have that loading set to true, just so I can see when this is happening. And then I'm also going to need a spinner. So to have a spinner, I can get the documentation for Bootstrap opened up. So let's get that open, go to docs, and find a spinner. Should be somewhere here. Yep, spinners. I'm just going to grab one that I like. So maybe this blue one's good. So I'm just going to grab this code, go back here, then have some logic. So if loading is true, I'm going to return the spinner. Otherwise, I'm going to return this button. And then I just have to change these class attributes to be class name because this is JSX. So there we are. So now with that, we can test this out. So I'm going to go to my code here. I'm just going to do a little refresh just in case. I'm going to put in the first name of John, last name Doe, email, johndoe@gmail.com, and then my password, which is going to be a nice secure password. And also if I were to do something like this, I'm going to get some front-end validation, which is nice. And now let's go ahead and take a look. So here's my DevTools extension. So right now here I have my dispatch types, only have this initial dispatch. So if I click register now, so I got a quick loader, And then here I actually got rejected. Okay, so I'm not running my Express server. So that's what's going on here. So now that I'm running this Express server, let's see if things will work. So John Doe. And then also you're going to see this little warning here. Don't worry about that. That's just something with React Router DOM that's showing up here, so not much you can do about that. I'm going to click on register. And now here is something that I wanted to actually see. So this is with CORS issues, which is now going to bring me to a whole another area with our development. So right now we have some options. So our Express server is running on localhost 5000. Our browser is running on localhost 3000. These are two different domains right now in development. Now this is a bit of an issue because right now that means we're going to have to set up CORS policies on our Express server so that our Express server can allow requests coming in which are cross-origin from localhost 3000. Now the thing is, I don't really want to do that because when this is going to be in production, remember what we're going to do is with our client, we're going to do that npm run build. We're going to get a production build folder, and then Express is going to be serving the React app on localhost 5000. So eventually it's going to be serving it on the exact same domain, which means you're not going to have any CORS issues. So pretty much by us setting up CORS on our Express server, it's a little bit pointless because then in production, we're not making use of that. So there is a better way to go about this and get around these CORS issues when we're in our development environment. So this is what we're going to do to get around this instead. So if I open up the documentation for create React app, and then I'm also going to search up something called proxy. So here it's going to bring me to proxying API requests in development. So this proxying thing, it's specifically a development thing you do. And then you can set it up. They have an example at the bottom, configuring the proxy manually. And this is what you're going to do. You're going to create in your source folder a setupproxy.js file, and you're going to place this code inside of here. And coincidentally, it's going to literally be exact same, this copy pasted, because right now we're going to have a target of localhost 5000. That's where our Express server is running from. So what this is going to do now is that when I'm on the browser and I send a relative request. So just to show that, if I open up this features user, right now we're sending this request like this, where we have localhost 5000/API/user/register. But instead, if I have something like this, so where it's just a relative path. So this right here, when you have a relative path, it's going to add on the current domain. So if I were to do it without a proxy, right here, the browser is going to add HTTP localhost 3000 to this. But when we use a proxy, it's instead going to put localhost 5000 if we configure it the same way it was in that documentation. And then what it's going to do is it's going to make, on Express, it's going to look like this request is coming from localhost 5000. And because it's going to look like it's coming from the same domain, you're not going to have any CORS issues. So then when we're on our development environment, we can conveniently have this be like this, and it's going to work. We're not going to have CORS issues. And then when we're on production, this will also work, because then the relative route is just going to be the current domain, which is the localhost 5000 domain. So this is a way where you can have a very nice development experience. And then I won't need this anymore. And then instead what I can have in my environment variable is have this be, or this is the wrong environment variable. So it's this one here, where I have the React App API URL. I don't even need this anymore. So instead I'm just going to put localhost 8000 here, just in case if I need to make any requests from the browser to my Django backend, which it's pretty likely you're going to want to do that anytime you make some kind of unauthorized request, or a request where you're not doing anything with the actual cookies, like setting them or removing them. Then you might just want to make a request directly to the Django backend API. So instead we can have this here, and then our config, instead API URL can just be the Django backend API. And then we're going to set up that proxy so that we can send this off like this and get around those CORS issues. Now there is quite a bit that goes on behind the scenes for this proxy to actually accomplish what it's doing here, which is making this request look like it's coming from localhost 5000. Then if you want, you can look into that a little bit more, but I'm not going to really dive into it in this video. So I'm just going to be utilizing it to make this whole development process a lot better. So now inside of my source, I'm going to add use proxy.js. Then I'm going to flip back here. I'm going to copy this code, go back, and paste that into here. And now make sure that you don't use the ES6 syntax. It even says that inside of there somewhere. I forget exactly where. Yeah, so here it is. I managed to find it. So this file only supports Node's JavaScript syntax. Be sure to only use supported language features. So no support for Flow, ES modules, so forth. So make sure it's written like this and you don't change it to the ES6 syntax, all right? So this is what we're gonna have here. And then we have to make sure that we import this package. So I'm gonna go into my client. So this is where my React app is running. I'm gonna stop running, do an npm install save, and then paste this HTTP proxy middleware. And then also make sure that your file is called use proxy. That's very important. You need this exact same spelling with the casing as well. And then with that, we can now do an npm start. And then we can test out this register again. Now here we're running on localhost 3000. So now let's see if this is gonna work. I'm gonna have that console open again. And now in this case, we got a different error. So 404 not found. And then also something that I noticed previously was also inside of my action creator, accidentally put a slash here for the dispatch type. That was when I was trying to demonstrate that fulfilled and whatnot. Then I forgot to remove that, but it should just be users/register. That way it's going to create the slash pending, slash fulfilled, slash rejected. Oh, and of course, it's not use proxy. It's supposed to be setup proxy. So that was actually my mistake. For some reason, I thought it was use proxy, but actually in the documentation, it clearly says somewhere here. Yeah, setup proxy.js. So that's why the spelling is very important. Otherwise, you're not going to get those requests proxied. So now with that, I can restart this. And now this should actually work. So now we got redirected to the login. So now if I take a look at my dispatch types, we have users register pending and users register fulfilled. So when this was pending, we had the loader. When it was fulfilled, we had registered to true. So now registered is true, which is also a bit of a problem because every time I click this, I'm going to get redirected back to the login. So that's the one thing I was mentioning with the login page. It's right over here. We're going to want to bring in that action creator. That was the reset registered. So if I go inside of here, at the bottom, that's one that we're exporting. So reset registered from users slice actions. So we're going to bring that in and dispatch it. That's going to be in the login page. So that's probably going to be the last thing I do in this video. Then I'm going to put this to a wrap. So I'm going to import use dispatch from React Redux. And I'm also going to import reset registered from features user. And then when this component mounts, so I'm going to have to import my use effect. So that way when this component mounts, I can just dispatch that. So I also have to do const dispatch is equal to use dispatch. And then I can dispatch reset registered. Just like that. So now on my login, if I refresh, I see the reset registered. All right, so now I can actually navigate back here and I can create an account. Once I get redirected, I can go back. So that's all fine. And then of course our registered should be false here. Perfect. All right, so that's gonna be everything I wanted to cover in this video. So we got through quite a bit in this video. We managed to finally get our registration working and set up our first route handler on Express, as well as our first asynchronous action creator on our front-end client. And then we also got to see little bit of that setup proxy and how that works. So that's going to be everything I wanted to cover in this video. So hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure to hit that like button. That way other people who also want to see this content can get it recommended in their YouTube feed or whatever. And then also make sure to subscribe if you enjoy this content, and I'll see you in the next one.